Hello, BookTube. It's Sunday, and from time immemorial on this channel, over the course of 15,000 videos, I have referred to this day as bleak and barren. Because alone, of all the days of the week, this is a day when I don't get free books in the mail. And that's always struck me as tragic. Uh, but I'm thinking that from now on, Sunday will be not the saddest day of the week, but the happiest day of the week. Because Sunday will be the day we do our read-along. From now on, no matter what we're reading, we'll get together on Sunday to talk about it. And today, we're starting our read-along of a biggie, Homer's Odyssey. We're reading the first 6 books of Homer's Odyssey this week. A little bit short notice. Next week, it'd be in the next 6 books, but it'll be much longer. I didn't realize until the last minute that we had no time. But these first 6 books start off what is one of the most popular stories in the history of humanity, and so popular that it's enshrined in song and pastiche and commentary, and has been forever. We have mosaics of the characters and incidents in this book going back thousands of years. I myself wrote a trilogy of novels born out of Homeric mythos, one on the Iliad, one on the Odyssey, and one on the homoerotic adventures of a character that we meet early on in our first 6 books today, and that's Telemachus, the teenage super hottie son of Odysseus. And those of you who went through our Iliad read-along will be well situated here. Those of you who are encountering the Odyssey for the first time without having read the Iliad and without having gone through our read-along will probably be a bit confused. Rereading these books for this read-along this time around, I was thinking, boy, it's amazing how much this story has caught on, considering how disorientingly off-putting it is at the beginning. We don't meet Odysseus right away, and we're not told much about the backstory. The backstory, of course, is that Odysseus was one of the kings. He was the king of Ithaca. He was one of the Greek kings who sailed with men to Troy when a Trojan prince kidnapped Helen of Sparta, the wife of Menelaus, who was the brother of Agamemnon, the high king of Troy. And they fight at Troy. They lay siege to the town and fight for 10 years. And then they sack the town and leave. There was a vast ancient literature of the homecomings of the great heroes, all the adventures they had on the way back. And while they're gone, their wives, of course, have stewards and men-at-arms, but their wives are running the kingdoms, including Penelope, the wife of Odysseus, who is alone in her palace except for Telemachus and some servants, and who is battened upon pretty quickly and steadily over the years by a group of suitors, a little bit over 100 suitors, men who want to just assume that Odysseus is never coming home and marry her and become king in his place. And she puts them off with wiles and long-suffering and courteous talk while they just eat her out of house and home. And there's nothing much that Telemachus could do about it. He doesn't have many armed men at his beck and call, and he himself isn't really a fighter. But the 6 books that we're reading today start off on Mount Olympus, where the gods are all assembled except for Poseidon, who hates Odysseus and has vowed that since I rule the seas, he'll never cross my territory to get back home. But when book 1 opens, it turns out that Poseidon is away. He's at the other end of the world. He's not on Olympus talking with the other gods to present his anger or to present his case. And in his absence, Athena, who has favored Odysseus forever, begs the king of the gods, Zeus, the king of the gods. I'm pausing here because I know all of these names in their Latin version, not their Greek version first. So I'm trying hard not to slip weird names on you. She pleads with Zeus, the king of the gods, that surely now is the time for Odysseus to be allowed to return home. And Zeus agrees because he's just recently been retelling for the gods the story of another homecoming. The High King Agamemnon, who got home and was killed by his wife and her lover. And that kind of parallel of a homecoming is on the god's mind when Zeus gives permission for Athena to orchestrate Odysseus' return home. At the time that our story starts, without much of an explanation to new readers at all, Odysseus is actually captive of a sea nymph named Calypso. She's been on her island, and he has no way of leaving. And two things happen roughly simultaneously, and it's a bit odd. Again, it's another thing that will confuse a first-time reader, because Athena begs Zeus to let her bring Odysseus home, and when Zeus says yes, if you're fresh from the Iliad, you kind of expect what's going to happen next. She's going to flash down from Mount Olympus to Calypso's island, take Odysseus up in her arm, and flash him across the sea to Ithaca. Gods do that all. They transport mortals from one place to another in the Iliad all the time. But she doesn't do that. Instead, she goes to Ithaca in disguise to talk with Telemachus, to get him moving, to get him out on the road to find out news of his father, when she knows perfectly well where his father is and everything that's happened to him. Telemachus doesn't know that, but she does. And at the same time, roughly the same time, the messenger of the gods, Hermes, is sent to the island of Calypso to inform her that it's the god's pleasure that she now give up her mortal boy toy, that she let him go. And she doesn't want to. She argues, but there is no arguing with Olympus, and so she eventually agrees to give him a craft and food and water and clothing and set him out on the open ocean for home. But that doesn't happen until book 5. For the first chunk of the 6 books that we're reading, we get Telemachus, who is motivated by Athena in disguise to go out on and seek news of his father. He sails first with a crew and a ship to Pylos, to sandy Pylos, who, in order to talk with its ancient king, Nestor, who was one of the kings who went to Troy. He was the oldest person at Troy. He'd been to Troy once before with Hercules. So that gives you some idea of that. He steps right out of the mythical past. But he made it safe at home. He's home and comfortable. And Telemachus goes to him to seek news, and befriends Nestor's teenage super hottie son, Pisistratus. And they decide, Nestor of course has no news at all. He has plenty of windy stories, but he has no news. And they decide to travel to Sparta and see King Menelaus. So they go to Sparta, and there's Menelaus, and right there as his queen in his palace is Helen. And it doesn't seem like a happy marriage. Helen is sad, she's reserved, and although Menelaus is never really openly disrespectful to her, he tells a story about how she was incredibly treacherous to the Greek men hiding inside the Trojan horse on the eve of Troy's destruction, trying to get them to reveal themselves so that the Trojans could kill them. It's not the kind of anecdote that a loving husband would tell about his wife to strangers. But one way or another, Helen also drugs the boys on their first night there. She gives them wine, but she puts something in it. But one way or another, Menelaus doesn't have much. He has stories to tell as well, but he doesn't have any useful information for them. And all that Telemachus' absence has done is inflame the suitors to finally put an end to this. I mean, obviously, if you've got a hall full of people who want to be the new king of Ithaca, the one thing you don't want is the rightful heir sitting around moodily brooding. So the suitors start to think maybe we should just kill Telemachus and be done with it. You can tell they have long since lost any fear that Odysseus is coming back. He's been gone for so long that they're not really thinking about that at all. And that's a dramatic string that Homer very intentionally keeps nice and taut for the climax a long time from now. But Odysseus, of course, has resisted Calypso's allures the whole time he's been with her. He is loyal to his wife. He loves Penelope. He's a man. He has desires and urges like any man, but he wants not to forget that his destination is home. No matter what paradises are offered to him, no matter how long he ends up staying in any of them, he wants to go home. So he takes the gift of a craft and clothing and water and food, and goes out on the open ocean. And bad timing intervenes, because right at that moment Poseidon returns to Olympus, or he returns from the end of the world. He doesn't go straight to the gods, but he sees right away that his hated Odysseus is out on the ocean, and wrecks him with a storm, and would have killed him. It's divine. Another goddess intervenes to save his life in the open ocean, but he washes up on the shore of the Phaeacians, the land of the Phaeacians, naked, crusted in salt, exhausted, finds his way to a tiny bit of shelter and goes to sleep. The book ends with just a wonderful little down note of this great hero is, when we meet him, almost immediately reduced to nothing. A naked, scraggly old man asleep on the beach. And then a princess of the island, Nausicaa, is basically instructed by Athena to go to the beach, where she encounters this naked stranger, and of course offers her the hospitality of the king and the court. And that's where our 6 books end. The gigantic, rolling, rollicking story of Odysseus, all of the stuff, all of the adventures that everybody knows, is still in the future. The book doesn't open with anything like that. The book opens on a scattered note of collecting threads. It's a clear indication. There are many clear indications, in my opinion, but it's a clear indication that one of the ways that you know that an ancient story has been told and told and retold and retold is if there are embedded, solid, calcified chunks in it that just don't make any sense at all. And the only reason that they're there is because they've always been there. And that you encounter quite a few of those in these first six books of the Odyssey. So I'm wondering what those of you who have never read the Odyssey might have made of it. One theme, if you will, I mean, Homer doesn't do anything as blatant as themes, but one theme that runs through these first 6 books is to give the reader an awareness of homecomings. We don't just learn about poor King Agamemnon, who was killed after all that time in Troy. He makes his way home and dies. We don't just learn about him, we also see homecomings. We see that Nestor is home and happy and prosperous. We see that Menelaus is home and not particularly enviable. He's king, but he doesn't seem happy, and Helen, the cause of it all, is distinctly unhappy. And we also see something of the world that we don't see at all in the Iliad. When we see the suitors in Odysseus' hall, and we see stories of servants and pictures of croplands and whatnot elsewhere on the mainland, we see glimpses of the world that is absent in the Iliad. We're at war in the Iliad. We're not flashing across the sea to look at home. All of that is really interesting, but it's not as gripping as the rest of the book. So I guess what I'm saying is I was a little worried when I was rereading these, that those of you who have been induced by me to read the Odyssey this time around might find it an off-putting opening 6 books. So please let me know whether or not it held your interest. I mean, it'd be one thing if Athena flashed down to Ithaca and appeared to Telemachus in person, but she disguises herself. She doesn't just disguise herself, but in a presage, something that's going to happen many, many times in the course of the book. She doesn't just disguise herself. She takes on an elaborate alternate identity. She tells the whole life story of someone she is not. And that's not quite as dramatic. That's not quite as dramatic. We see in the first 6 books a world of disjointed chaos. And the larger drift of the poem will be towards restoring some kind of order, but it's going to take a while. So that's the first 6 books of the Odyssey, and the next 6 books are distinctly different. The next 6 books are narratively far more fast-paced and energetic. So I, of course, love this opening. I absolutely love it. I loved it. I loved it so much that I actually wrote it out as a book. My Telemachiad is the story of Telemachus, shortly before the events that we see in Book 1 of the Odyssey, and then quite a bit afterwards. And I think it's fantastic, and in one way, not to Telemachus' benefit, because we're another thread that runs through, not so much in these first 6 books, definitely in the next 6 books, and throughout the rest of the poem, is that the next generation, the second generation, the generation after the heroes, isn't as good, isn't as strong, or as wise, or as powerful, or as noble as the heroic generation, and that's just fascinating. Unfortunately, Telemachus suffers for that because he's a bit of a noodle. but maybe you thought otherwise. Tell me what you thought of these characters. I'd love to hear it. If you're coming to the Odyssey for the first time, the thing that jumped out at me this time around, if you're coming to the Odyssey for the first time, did you find it odd that Athena, having been given permission to get Odysseus home, doesn't simply bring him home? Were you expecting that? Did it surprise you that she goes about doing something completely different, and something that seems pointless or even dangerous? Because of course, her plan is what gets the suitors riled up to want to kill Telemachus instead of just mocking him in public. One way or another, let me know what you thought of these 6 books, and let me know also, if you want, in the comments field, let me know which Odyssey you're reading. I'm holding up the Robert Fagles here, which is it had an enormous print run. It's a very, very attractive paperback edition, so a lot of you might have that, but I'm curious to know which one you're using. And that's it for today. Next Sunday, we will reconvene for books 6, the next 6 books, 6 through 12, and watch as Odysseus' famous adventures get kicked off. But in the meantime, I'm wishing you all happy reading, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.